Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Anita Scribnigre. I work in the Google University Alumni Relations, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you tonight on behalf of Google. I am extremely happy to see so many of you. As you know, Google has a strong history with Stanford, and we have a lot of Stanford alumni working here. At Google, we've been building over time strong relationships on the student side, but what is new is that now we are looking to build also strong relationships with alumni organizations, and it's a great pleasure to start our partnership with this particular event with the Stanford Business School Black Alumni Association. So it's really a pleasure to see so many students and alumni here tonight. And I'd really like to thank the alumni organization for working with us. I would like to thank Linda Pennington, who will be our moderator tonight. She's a former president and a very active member of the association. I'm sure many of you know her. And she will introduce our panelists tonight. And we have I think, great panel, and I think the topic will be very relevant to all of us. We at Google believe very strongly in diversity. Well, first of all, because we want our own Googlers to represent the diversity of our users, and also because we have a social responsibility and really want to support communities and support diversity in general. So we hope that this is only the first of many events that we'll have together. We also want to promote networking, because that's actually what works the best in promoting people's career and opportunities in life. And so we hope that you already had a great chance to network with each other during this first hour, and we'll have some time at the end. During that discussion, if you have any questions, if you want to, if you want to participate, we'll have a mic that will actually come here in the middle, and we would like to ask you to come in the middle. It will make things easier, actually, if you can line up and ask the questions that way. The one thing I wanted to tell, don't be shy. If you can move, actually, you might have noticed that the two first rows have the wonderful book of Dr. Greene. The two first rows have the copies available. So if the first ones to move will get it. The other ones can obviously order it online, and we'll give you more information at the end. So don't be shy. Come on here. With that, I will wish you a wonderful night. I hope you will really enjoy it. We are very happy to see you, so we are hoping that you'll have a wonderful night. And I'll pass it to Linda.
Okay. Thanks, Anita. Actually, we'll probably take that one. Let's leave it with Artis. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'm Linda Parker Pennington. It's so nice to see some smiling, familiar faces. So all I'm going to do is do double duty. Originally, I was just going to introduce everyone, and now I've been asked to serve as moderator. But I first want to thank Google and LaFawn Davis and Sunita for putting out the money to do this, and for actually getting you all here and supporting the Stanford Black Alumni, GSB Black Alumni Association, of which I'm one of the co-founders, as it happens. So it is my honor to welcome you. And the way we like to do things, these programs, at Google, is we like to make them very interactive. So I do have a set of questions that I'll take our panelists through, but there are just a few questions, and then we're going to leave about a half hour for you all to have your own questions. So I want you to be thinking about your questions, and then there will be a microphone that we'll have you on. And we are videotaping this session for YouTube for uploading. I'll just start off by introducing everyone briefly, and I think you have their bios. I'm not going to read their bios or anything, but I'm really excited that everyone is here who we asked, and I know everyone here, so I'm quite proud that they showed up. So Frank Greene is an icon in Silicon Valley. I think a lot of you, if you haven't met him before, have heard of his accomplishments as a venture capitalist and a leader, and recently he's been very focused on developing his foundation called Go Positive, which he'll tell you about. And then next to Frank is Stacy Brown-Philpot, who is the president of the Black Googlers here, and she's been at Google for several years, and she's a GSB alum, so delighted that she's here with us. And then Lamar Bunce, who is also a GSB alum and an entrepreneurial guy with many gifts. And then finally, Artis Hardy, who is also GSB alum, and I won't say what year people are from, because then people start to think about age, and this is not necessary nor relevant, in my humble opinion. So, and all of them graduated after me, so we're definitely not talking about that. And so you won't get a chance to meet Ed Bailey, who would have been our moderator this evening, but I hope you get a chance subsequently to meet Ed, who's one of the talented team here at Google. So with that, I will start with my first question, which is actually for all of the panelists, so I'll ask you to kind of go in order. So first, I'd just like you to describe the most important career choice that you think you have made to date, and the benefits and upside of the choice, maybe how you went about the choice, and the benefits of having made that particular choice.
You want me to start?
You have to start, Frank.
Okay. Actually, there's probably been 3 career choices, and it's hard to tell which has been most important. I guess the first one, when I decided to be an electrical engineer when I was coming out of high school, and also going into Air Force ROTC, which opened up opportunities for me to see a whole different world through working at a place called National Security Agency and seeing what high-speed computing really is all about, excuse me, in this country. A second choice, and related to that first choice, was coming out to California and working at Fairchild. And so, as you know, in life, we make choices, and each choice creates a result, and then you make another choice and you create a second result. So it's hard to just isolate one choice, because a choice usually leads to a whole series of different choices and different results. But a distinct choice, a different choice kind of for me, was leaving Fairchild and starting a software company in the early 70s with a couple of other engineers, and learning what it took to build a company from scratch without any management experience, or I had a lot of leadership experience because of my Air Force and just life experiences. And I had to fall back on that leadership experience, and that's one of the things I've been talking about and writing about here in recent years. And that led to a whole series of other activities for me, which I'm not going to talk about in detail, but that was that idea of starting a company and really starting to really take charge of my own future. Created a whole different concept for me of how you can do things in your life. And then the third choice was because of a good friend of mine, who's also one of my ski buddies, a fellow by the name of John Douglas. I think you know John Douglas. John called me one day and he said, "Have you ever thought about starting a venture capital fund?" And this was about 20 years ago now. And I said, "No, John, I haven't." And plus, I didn't think, that wasn't something that I could see myself doing. He said, "Well, why don't you have lunch? Let's have lunch and talk about it." And he had another fellow who was thinking about the same thing. And so the more we talked about it, the more I kind of liked the idea. And so about 10 years ago, I did start a venture capital fund, and that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And that exposed me to a whole different range of life experiences. In the boom days of the internet, we were seeing 500 business plans a year. I was personally seeing 500 business plans a year. Sometimes I'd be talking to 1 or 2 groups a day. I got a lot of experience in dealing with folks who are thinking about starting companies and understanding the challenges that they're facing, and that's another factor that has given me some insights about what people need to know about leadership, and that's part of the life experience that I've had as a result of these choices. Now, can you say one is more? And then along the way, and I'm not trying to make this as if it's kind of a fourth choice. It's really, in a lot of ways, maybe the first choice. Is I've had a family which has been really near and dear to me, and so that was another important choice. But I think since we're here to talk about careers and probably not families, I'll stick with those. Okay.
Stacy.
Thanks. So since he did 4, I can do 5. Kind of beat that. No, I think I'll do 3. Is that okay? They'll be quick. I'm efficient, Linda. I think the first for me was choosing to go to business school. I had applied to the GSB. I had gotten in, and I was at Goldman Sachs, and this was in 1999, 2000, and I had an opportunity to stay. And they were like, stay, you're good, this is great, M&A, look how much money you can make. And this is a great trajectory, it's fast. And something about that seemed really, really interesting. And I liked living in New York. I was happy. My friends were there. But I applied to Stanford because I wanted to experience a different part of business. And that's that early stage part, and just see what that was like. I grew up in the Midwest in Detroit. I had lived on the East Coast. And so coming out to the West Coast was probably one of the best things that I've done, because I got an exposure to things that I would not have gotten exposure to. And then having that experience at the GSB, obviously helped that along the way. I think the second one was joining Google. So I just told somebody this decision to join Google. They're like, how did you know that this is going to be such a successful company? And I didn't. I joined Google in 2003. We were a search engine that had a business model that was successful but was private, and it wasn't proven. And so no one knew. So I didn't join Google because we were this successful company. I joined I jokingly joined because I really wanted a dog, and you can bring your dog to work. And so I got a dog. I've been at Google for 5 years. My dog is 5 years old. Do the math. But the other reason is I had a conversation with someone who was very insightful and said, a company like Google is the type of company that I think only comes around once in your career where you are. And they had been working in business for like 20 years. And I said, really? And so I think that the decision to sort of listen to that person on top of the people was a great one. And then the last one was changing jobs. And I had done the same thing for 4 years. It is very easy to get comfortable in one position, in one job. But I had learned a lot. You join a company, a lot of people are looking for jobs right now. Join a company that's growing, because you will get opportunities. And I got an opportunity to change jobs, and I was scared. I took a risk. It's something totally different. I was a finance person. I'm a CPA. I did accounting and auditing, and now I run an operations team. And so it's very, very different. But I took a risk, and having done that, have learned and expanded my skill set far more than I could have ever imagined.
Is this one on? So for me, I'd say my most important decision was highly influenced by a mentor that I had also. Before business school, I was in investment finance, doing consulting, advising large investment funds. And so I got to know a lot of the private equity and venture capital investors who were coming looking for money from large college endowments, et cetera. So I was pretty excited by that, and came out to business school from the East Coast, wanting to get involved more in the technology investing, or work in a big technology company for a little bit and then do investing. What I learned during business school, it was actually through a mentor, through the Alumni mentoring program. A person convinced me to join a biotech startup during my summer. And I had more fun than I ever imagined you could have on a job, right? And I learned that you can, have just an amazing time and still call it work, right? And that influenced a lot for me. I mean, it meant that for me, just compared to talking to my peers who were going to consulting firms and banking, investment banks who were making good money and felt pretty secure, I guess many of them reinforced this for me. I felt so charged up by what I was doing. I felt like I was changing the world. It was biotech, so you could talk about saving lives and all that stuff. But we had so much fun just working with a small team. I had an incredible boss who was a CEO, a really dynamic person who was one of the most interesting people I'd ever met too. So it taught me about who you work with, and what you're doing, how you feel about what you're doing, and that you're having fun every day is really important. So I ended up actually circling back to a lot of my mentors who were investors. I even talked to Frank back in the day, being someone who was seasoned in venture capital. And what they all told me is that you still want to be an investor long term. If you really want to be a good investor, get some good experience in an operating company, and then maybe 10, 20 years come back around and you'll be much more valuable. You'll have a network, and you'll have experience actually knowing what makes a company tick, et cetera. But they all said something else that was really important that probably influenced me more. They said, if you're having fun, though, keep doing it. Why not keep doing it? So that's kind of what's influenced a lot of my career. I've done a lot of very entrepreneurial and even entrepreneurial things within bigger companies, starting up new divisions and business units. So.
I'll speak to maybe 3 career turns. And one of the things that's been key for me is that pretty early in my life, I had done a couple of things that would, from a lifelong perspective, be very important to me. One was travel internationally. And when I was 23, I think I spent about a month abroad. And so one of the first career decisions was to not go to Wall Street. I was a closet finance person at the business school, so a lot of people were pretty surprised when they found out I was going to Bankers Trust, which no longer exists. And then they were just as surprised when I decided not to go. And decided to stay in the Bay Area and work for a high-tech firm. So my first company was Tandem. And at Tandem, I then decided that I wanted to be a very non-traditional finance person. I fought and never went to corporate. I did everything from run an MIS team to the traditional strategic analysis. I spent a year doing regression analysis, forecasting revenue. By the way, I never thought I'd do that one. GSB folks know why. But my stint at Tandem was very key in terms of really solidifying for me some core values, which was I needed and wanted balance because I was a parent. The second move was to still within high tech, but it was to move to another company that gave me a lot of international experience. And while I never lived in a foreign country, I had some very clear parameters that I would travel internationally, but never really live in a foreign country. And so I negotiated the number of trips that I would take. I had responsibility worldwide, traveled a number of times to India because I set up operations there. I had operations in Singapore and Ireland. Very early in my life, and I'll speak to this, I had responsibilities not only for my family, but also caring for aging parents. And then third, it was to really decide that I wanted to take a break, so to speak. I did that. I decided that I wanted to work on a part-time basis and was able to do that, and then spent time really going from being a leader in a company to a leader in my own company. And it's a large stretch. It's a change from becoming someone within a corporation to actually leading your own endeavor. And I've been doing that for a while.
So thank you. I noticed a couple of themes to everything that you all said. One was you all seem to choose to take the less obvious route and to pursue that route somewhat differently from what would have been, sort of a logical choice. But then the other thing that struck me was that it was always based on what's your passion. It was driven inwardly as opposed to saying, okay, yeah, I could make a lot of money over here, but this one feels right for me, and that seemed to be, those were two things that I noticed about your responses, which was fascinating. So I wanted to ask Stacy a follow-up question. What were the real factors behind your decision to switch from a financial career when you made that important job switch from something that was your comfort zone to something that was outside of your comfort zone? What was behind that, and were there mentors that helped you, come to that decision?
Yeah, there were mentors, but I think what triggered my decision to look around was I kind of looked up, and to some degree, I felt like half of the time I was going through the motions, and the other half of the time I was like thinking and actually doing something. And I wasn't going through the motions because I was bored or uninterested in the work. It was because I started to see cycles of things over and over. And I'd been in finance. And so anyone who's in finance knows that there are cycles. And when you start doing that and getting in that place, you start to lose the ability to be creative and innovate. And the thing that I really liked about joining Google, and when I first started, was I could just create whatever I wanted. This finance job was whatever I wanted it to be, and creating things and being innovative was really important to me. And I didn't have that. I didn't have as much of that. So I started looking for that next thing. And as I started to do that, I realized that there are parts of my brain I just wasn't using. Having a finance background was very core to some of the things I learned in school, but right after I graduated from business school, I didn't join Google. I actually tried to start a company, and so there were things around sales. I had worked in business development, around marketing, around operations that I had done before that had gone kind of latent a little bit. So I decided I wanted to look for something that allowed me to use other skills that I wasn't using in this current job. And the reason why that was important was because I needed like a long run time. I can get bored very quickly. My attention span is about that long. And so I knew I needed something that was going to give me 2 years of like interesting, weird, crazy challenges. And so I wanted like 180 degrees different from what I was doing. And so that was when the mentor came in. That person helped me see that, you know what, maybe you should think about not being in finance. Like, what about another group? And I had never thought about that. And I said, you know what, maybe I could join another group. And she helped me get the job that I have, and she helped position me very well for the job that I have. And so I run a group called Consumer Operations. We support all of our free products. So there's like there's no money. No one pays us to use Gmail. None of you today, right? Pay me to use Gmail. And it's a very interesting model where I have a team of people who just want users of Google products to be happy with the products. It is not necessarily about like how much money we're going to make. It is about how delighted you are with the product, which is very, very different from what I was doing in finance. And so coming in and running this group of like over 150 people, that's very much about creativity and innovation. And I was already, my group was like 10 people about finance, was totally different. And so I think that gave me an opportunity to use some skills that I hadn't used before, be creative and be innovative in a way that I hadn't done before. And that's really what sparked that change for me.
Okay, thank you. That's fantastic. I want to go to Lamar now with a follow-up question because Lamar is, as you might have noticed from hearing his background, kind of a serial entrepreneur. And I wanted you to describe what is it that inspires you to make those leaps, when you have to make judgments about taking something that's different. What is it that, and if you fail at something because maybe you don't always make the right choice, right? How do you recover, and what's your recovery process like?
Yeah, I partly mentioned it before, is that, if I'm having fun, it seems right. But if I'm not doing things that are totally off track in a lot of cases. Some of the things I've done, actually my first role out of business school was within a company. I worked right here on this campus with SGI, and we had a mandate to start a services business, to build $1 billion business that was going to be like a third of the company's revenues, right? But I got hired in to work with a guy who was on the CEO's staff, and to see all the inner workings of what goes on in the C-level club, and understand growing a business from within a big company, from like zero up. There's a lot of excitement in that, a lot of possibilities, a lot of room to try different things. Someone coming right out of business school, to have the opportunity at that level to make things happen, to build business plans and see them come to fruition and make things really happen. It was fun and exciting. But at the same time, I knew I was going to have a paycheck the next couple of weeks. So it wasn't something that was totally risky when I had all these student loans to pay, right? So, but then I also had opportunities, later on because of my network I built. I got recruited into a lot of these other opportunities. So I helped start a company that actually Frank was a big contributor in this too. We actually started out of Frank's conference room back years ago. But, a company that was a lot of these senior execs, Fortune 500 kind of execs who wanted to put together a software company, and they called on me to help them do it, to be the future guy to take over the reins, So that, there's a lot of fun in helping make that happen with some experienced people. I helped raise money, raise the venture capital, do a lot of research for them to help figure out what kind of a product it was, what it was going to be. I did all the research for the customers, talking to, in our case, it was CIOs, people who ran IT in big companies and governments. So I talked to about 250 CIOs to learn, what their real problems were and understand what, what they really needed. And then it was my job to build a product around it. Then we had something to sell. I had to go and help put together a sales organization, the processes and all that. And then we needed, to actually deliver this stuff, and the customers wanted help, say, what do we do with this? We put together a services business. I was instrumental in helping put that together. So, for me, it was a way to try different things, but in each of those cases too, there was a little bit of pull going on where people said, oh, you've done good work here. Would you consider moving over here and trying something else? And so for me, it was not so risky. It was an opportunity. I'd look more, it was the opportunity versus some kind of a risky track, moving away from something that was certain.
I'm going to come back to the second part of the question later when we go to the Q&A, okay? Because I do want to, because I think I would like to ask that question to everybody too. So I'm going to go to Artis, and I'm going to ask a final question to Frank, and then we're going to open it up to everyone. So Artis, so I want to know, and you talked about this a little bit because you decided to take some time and just start your own business, and so it gave you time to focus on raising your daughter. And so how have you balanced your personal values and your professional aspirations on your path to success?
That's an ongoing process. I would say it's always just being honest about what the trade-offs are, looking at what your values are, picking organizations that are aligned or endeavors that are aligned. And I'm a person who really comes from my view of the world and my value set. And so it takes a lot of soul searching, I'd say, and understanding that I'm just looking for and promoting the lifestyle and the answers that work for me, and that what I bring to the table, even with my value set, is very valuable.
And it seems to me that takes a fair amount of self-awareness and self-understanding to get to that too.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So I'm going to ask one last question here, just for Frank. And Frank could talk for 2 days about the stuff that he has to talk about, but he only has 2 minutes or 3. So.
Good idea.
So.
John, talk.
And I know you're going to spin this differently anyway. So, but given the number and variety of tools that are available for career development that are now available, what do you think is the best way for someone to figure out what will work for them, in developing themselves and their career?
Okay. Before I answer that question, I want to just ask you all. You read the theme for tonight's discussion, right? How many of you are seriously thinking about making a major transition in your? How many of you have the confidence that you know how to do that? How many of you have made major transitions before and done it successfully? Good. Okay. So now, if I was to go around and ask you to explain to some younger person what was that process all about, I'm sure each of you would probably have a different way of answering that question. And part of the reason for this question about tools is to address this question of, if you're thinking about making a major transition in your own personal life, your career, or maybe in your family, where there's a big significant change, that situation has a different label. Now, what we typically learn in school is we learn about management. And when you learn about management, you learn about processes. And that's where you learn about tools. So you learn about accounting tools, or you learn about personnel policies, or you learn about manufacturing policies. And so the language becomes really critical. And so what I wanted to make the distinction about is the difference between management, where we talk about these processes and tools and we try to keep everything kind of under control, versus when you're making these major transitions, things are out of control. I mean, that's the whole reason you're making this transition. So you're going into, as the theme said, an uncertain climate. So we don't necessarily know which, quote, tool will work, because we don't even know what the situation really is for sure. So now we need a different process. That process that people use to make these changes is often called leadership. And, I've been doing this work on leadership for a while now, and not just in the last couple of years because I've been writing about it, but been thinking about it and trying to understand what's the biggest single factor between the success and failure of most startup businesses. And I've talked to a lot of people I know in the venture capital business and in the business community, and it usually comes down to this concept of leadership. The problem is there's not a single definition. Everybody tends to have their own definition. So in just kind of self-defense, I said, okay, I was talking to Willie Hooks, who Lamar knows. He gave me an insight, which I found is very valuable, is one way to think about leadership is the way is in terms of the work that you do as a leader. And when you think about it that way, you realize that everybody who does leadership work, you had a goal when you decided to take on a challenge. You started off with a vision, or an idea, or a picture, or something that you wanted to do differently than you hadn't already done. So let's just call that part of vision. You had to get some help. Hopefully you got some help from some smart people who could give you some advice that would likely work. Or they may also need to work with you. That process we call building relationships. And if you look at leaders, they always are good at building relationships. And then the third part, is how do you accomplish the results? What is it that you need to do with the people? What do you need to learn for yourself in order to be able to accomplish results? That part we call the execution, because execution is kind of one of the end terms in the leadership management world these days. And so we've developed this process called the VRE leadership model, and the books that are on these first two rows talk about this VRE model. But that turns out to be a universal leadership process. I could take anyone in this room who's gone through a uncertain, changed situation in their own lives, and they've always gone through that process. You may not have thought about it that way, but when you do think about it that way, you begin to realize, I've done that before. I can do it again. And so part of what we try to do is, and we're teaching fifth and sixth graders the same concepts, because they've always accomplished something. I've had workshops with 65-year-old folks who've been through senior management, and they use the same process, and they help work with their teams because it's universal. The thing about leadership is personal. It's not a set of tools. It's how we develop our relationships. There's attitudes and there's emotions and all kind of things happen. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. But hopefully we try to make it better than not so better. So I just want to kind of put that out there. When you talk about tools, to make the distinction is that when you're taking on a new challenge, you may not have the tools. Tools is not a good way to look at it. Once things have kind of gotten some structure, then you can talk about tools. But when you are starting out with a new challenge, you've got to figure out, what is my vision? how I'm going to get some people interested and inspired to support that vision, and then how am I going to execute to be able to accomplish that vision. And so in this sense, we're talking about something that's a very creative process. I mean, in a sense, you may be starting with a blank piece of paper, and you are going to create what that picture is going to look like, and you're going to have some other people helping you create that picture. That's a very different process. The book that you have is about Own Your Success, and it's all about taking on this as if it's a creative process, as if you're an artist, not as if you're a manager. And that is a fundamental different way of thinking about things. And if we don't start thinking about things this way in our lives and in our country, we're going to be, we're already having our lunch eaten, and it's just going to continue to be eaten that way. But on the other hand, this country is people in this country are well known about being very creative, and that's where we have had our strength, is in our creative ability. And I can tell you from just personal experience, I've seen so much creative ability going around this country, it's unbelievable. And so I just want to kind of leave you with that thought, that what you're talking about when you start making a major transition is think of it as a creative process that you are going to take ownership of, and not just a management process. Well, if I can just find the right, the rule on page 35, I'll be able to make this all work, because that's just not the way it is.
Well, I think that's a great jumping off place now for questions. So I know there's got to be at least a few of you who have questions. So if you want to, hi Leslie, if you want to come up and to the microphone, because we want to record you. So I hope this will be all right, since you'll be, that way we can hear you. The microphone is in the middle. So if you want to line up, what we usually do at Google is we sort of line up at the microphone so we know how many. And I'll try to moderate it, because I wanted us to finish this segment by 8 o'clock, and then we'll have dessert and some more networking and coffee and wine. And so if we can ask your question, pretty succinctly while you're at the microphone, that would be great. Come on up. You first, Leslie. Leslie DeBeek, another Stanford alum.
Yes, sorry I didn't have a cardinal jacket tonight.
It's okay.
First derivative. Quick question for Doctor. The book you mentioned, or your writings?
I'm sorry, say again?
The title of the book?
There's one book called Own Your Success, and there's some copies that were on the first 2 rows here tonight, and I have a few more copies if you're interested. There's another book that we're writing for students, which is called Create the Future You Want. And within that, we have some booklets that we've developed about being your very best, and in this case, it's being your VRE best, so that we help students realize how to realize a much higher expectation. Because one of the things that you've heard this expression, seeing is believing. You've heard this expression, seeing is believing. Mm-hmm. How many people believe that? You're not sure. You know this is a trick question, right? So you're not sure. See, I can tell you there are not many risk takers in this room.
Oh, we're not recording the people in the audience, so you can raise your hand and say it won't be captured on YouTube for that.
Well, it turns out, and the psychologists have confirmed this, is that it's believing is seeing. Believing is seeing. I've got to say it again. Believing is seeing. And it turns out if you do not believe it, you can walk by something all day long, all year long, all your lifetime long, and you will never think that you can participate in it because you don't believe it. And so what we try to do with students especially is to try to change their belief system as a way to give them, open up for them the possibilities of what they might do in their lives. And I've done some work with some middle school kids in East Menlo Park. This was a special boys program. What they see is a lot of what's on television. So a lot of them want to be professional athletes. But then as soon as we start to say, look, okay, we can show you how to do that, but first you got to get into this top school. A lot of these boys want to go to USC. So we said, okay, let's talk about how are you going to get into USC. And so when we started saying, look, we don't tell a kid, you can't do that. We tell a kid, let's put a plan together on how you're going to get into USC. It changes their whole attitude. We had one kid who was a smart kid, but he had a tendency to get distracted. He was kind of action-oriented. You're talking about being action-oriented. He wanted to be, he needed to be in action all the time. At any rate, he went through this program using some of these VRE concepts. His grade point average went from 1.5 to 3.5 in one semester because we helped change his belief system first. And all I can say is that if there's nothing else that you get tonight, and if you don't believe me, there's books you can read. There's a book called Smart Work, which is one of the references in our book, which talks about this idea of the difference between believing it in order to see it. And if you don't believe it, your lack of belief will act like a filter. It will block the same, you and I could be looking at the same picture. And if you don't believe it and I believe it, I'll see a whole different picture than you'll see.
Excellent. Thank you, Frank.
That was my easy question. My real trick question to the whole panel was, in this recession that we are in, how do we be like artists and make a committed decision to go from, say, corporate America, out of our finance comfort zones, into nonprofit or philanthropic?
And if you can keep your answers brief, because I see we have quite a few more questions too. Thank you.
2008 was a year when I decided yet again to stay out of economic or an endeavor and try to figure out what I wanted to be when I decided to be grown up the next time. And it really, I think, looking at your strengths or finding out what your strengths are, being very clear and honest about what your desires are, and being honest about what some of your non-negotiables are, and in what environment those non-negotiables come into play. And at different points in your lifetime, you may have different realities, but for most of us, our values and the beacons and the buoys that keep us steady in choppy waters are very clear. It's just a lot of times we don't know what they are, or we may have chosen to reshift our priorities. And sometimes when we're out of balance, not only are we facing both external challenges, but also internal challenges, and can't really distinguish between the two.
I just have a quick answer to that question. When you're starting to do something new, always start out with the people who know and love you. Don't start out with a bunch of strangers, because if you can't get good advice from people who know and love you, how strangers are going to give you good advice?
Hi, my name is Andrea Harris. The question I have for the panel is, what's the biggest mistake that you've ever made in your career, and how do you think we can learn from it?
Thank you for coming back to that question. That was the second part of the Lamar question, so I'm going to let you start, Lamar.
So I think I told you about most of the jobs I've ever taken were right in line with what I wanted to do. I usually judge things for four main criteria, right? Is it important? Is it highly visible? Is it growth opportunity? And is it fun? Have fun. So that was before I even started digging deeper, I used those as sort of criteria to think about my jobs. I did come across an opportunity where they were willing to pay me a good amount of money. And, it was high visibility. I was working for the CEO company on a high growth spurt, profits going through the roof and all that. And it was a good opportunity for me to be visible and grow. The one thing that was, I think, the mistake that I regretted and I learned a lot about is just really knowing about, or thinking about who you're going to be working with. The people that you work with day to day matter a lot. Your satisfaction on the job, the team that you're working with, especially the person you're working for, but it can turn a great opportunity into a real drag. I got to a point where I was just while I was doing good work, I enjoyed the customer. I always did a lot of customer-facing work, and I enjoyed being out there. But there are some team members, the way their work ethic, the motivation was all different from what I was used to. I used to being around a lot of motivated people like Stanford Business School types and Google types, and go-getters, and I ended up with some people who are just they had different kind of work ethic. It just dragged everything down. It made a real impression on me how important it was, the people that surrounded me in the workplace.
Anyone else? Artis?
A couple of years ago, I'd say about 4 years ago, I started playing poker. And one of the greatest mistakes I learned was when what you want is on the table, you need to know when it's time to cash it in. And that can be on a number of things. Know when it's time to decide and execute, because sometimes the window of opportunity may be very, very small. And so get advice, but also listen to your gut. And if you've gotten a lot of expert advice, but you still got some uneasiness in your gut, I would say go with your gut, especially if it's only advice and you're the only one who has something real tangible to lose.
Yeah, just a quick answer about the mistakes. I mean, I've always liked the work I've done at the time I was doing it, so that was for me never a problem. But I guess the biggest mistake I've made over the years is acting out of being angry or fearful about something, because we have this little process where you can go from fear, anger, and go to stupidity. And I have made some really stupid decisions when I've been angry and upset. And so, I mean, if that's the one thing I've learned, is to try not to make a decision when I'm really upset, because I have really done some dumb things and it's too late. You can't take them back.
Great. All right. Stacy, you're skipping that? Okay. So now I have to put you on the spot.
Yes. That's okay. My question is for Stacy. My name is Lindsay Maynard, and I'm class of 2009. And my question is for you, because I believe you graduated around the tech bubble burst. Mm-hmm. And what they've told us at the GSB is that now's the time in our lives to take risk, job risk. And my question is, what is safe right now versus risky as you see large companies failing and things like that? Is now the time to start a business, or is now the time to go the traditional route? And what did your classmates, and how did you keep that in mind?
So I lived my life up until probably 2 years ago with like this grand master plan. So like I grew up in Detroit, single mother. I wanted to go to college. I went to college. People, did so much to sacrifice for me to get there. So I had to get out. I had to get a good job. I was going to get married by this date, have kids by this date. And my life was so planned. I had all written down. I had a structure. And then things just I don't have children. I was supposed to have children like 5 years ago. I don't have any. I met my husband like way too early. I've known him for 14 years, and we've been married for 8 years. I wasn't supposed to meet him until 7 years ago. So, I'm terrible at planning. But, a lot of these things, and a lot of it is like, okay, this is the route I'm going to take. This is the path I'm going to take. And, what happens is things just don't work out like you expect, but they work out for the best. And, I found my soulmate. I love him very much, and I'm glad I found him earlier because there he was. And so, I would say that, when 2002, when I was graduating, I didn't have a job. And I remember everybody in my class was interviewing. very early on, because like the banks and the consulting firms would come first, and I didn't want to do those jobs. And they were like contacting me, like, "Are you coming back?" Goldman Sachs coming, "Are you coming back?" And the consulting firms. And I said, "I really don't want to do this. Like, I know if I went and did, I had one of those moments. I know if I went and did this, I could be successful, but I wasn't excited about it." And so as I started to look for jobs in the technology industry, I had worked in venture capital for the summer, and I got the very same advice that you got about, if you want to be an investor long run, go out and get some experience. I was like, great, there's all these tech companies. I'm going to go get some experience. And then they just weren't hiring as much. So, you end up in this place of like, okay, so what do I really want to do? What really drives me? And so I thought about starting a company, and I was actually working with somebody to start a company for 9 months before, I joined Google. And I think underlying all of that is just, taking a little bit of long-term perspective. And that's hard to do when you're about to graduate. It's really hard to do. But also thinking about like what matters to you, like what are you interested in and what are you excited about? And do that thing. Because even if it doesn't work out, at least you will have some personal fulfillment, and you will do well because you're excited about it and you'll be the best at it and people will notice you. And so I think that that's one thing that I would give to someone who's graduating to think about as you begin your career. I think there are still companies that are hiring. So I think what's safe is companies that are actually hiring and growing. And there are companies that are hiring and growing even as some of these companies are failing or laying off and things like that. So go and find those companies and get a job there. And take the job you get. Don't get picky, Seriously, don't. Take the job you get as long as it's a growing company, you respect the values of who founded the company and the leadership, and you think you can learn something and work with those people, that's a good opportunity for you.
Can I answer a little bit differently or give another perspective? As a Stanford GSB grad, I would tell my friends a lot, I don't forget why I came to the GSB. And I came to the GSB, and I'm only speaking for me personally, even though I ended up with a job at a corporation, I went to the GSB to have every option. And so Stanford trains you, if it's your desire to work for a company, but Stanford is the entrepreneurial school of the world. And so in turbulent times, if you have ever wanted to start a company, if you have ever wanted to run a company, I would say yes, look for a position, but excluding your student loans and excluding the fact that, you have to provide for your living. Use this as an opportunity to go for it, to really go for it, because it's at the beginning of your career where you can really set the stepping stones for your ultimate dream. And if your ultimate dream is to own a $1 billion company, to be a strategic partner to Google, that is the time where you should be willing to start putting those things in place.
I'd just like to make a comment that's probably going to sound like heresy. And I'm saying this on the basis that of probably all the business plans and people I've talked to, we used to ask them one question: what's the value proposition? How are you creating value for somebody else? Not for yourself, but for somebody else. And I would guarantee, I'll tell you, 90% of the people did not answer that question. They never thought about that question. And so the heresy that I want to put on the table is the world is not about you. You may think it's about you because you've been to Stanford. And you get out in the world and you discover there are people out there who know how to create value for people. And those people who know how to create value, they're the ones who are making all the money. And so when you're starting to look around for where do you want to go and what do you want to do in your life, part of the answer to me is how can you create value for somebody else that they'll want to pay you a lot of money? so that they'll want to invest in keeping you around, other than just giving you a place to work, and having you down on the expense line. Actually, what you want to do is you want to get. You don't want to be down in the expense. I mean, every organization has a line. You don't want to be down below the line, which is the expense line. You want to be above the line where they're investing in you because they expect a return. The only way they're going to get a return is where you're creating value for them. That's why I say it's not about you. It's about what can you do for somebody who's going to help hopefully pay you a lot of money. And that is such a fundamental difference that folks miss that. I mean, like I said, 90% of the people, when they couldn't answer that question, that was kind of the end of the discussion. I mean, I don't know if you know what the statistics are for companies that raise venture capital. Anybody know what the statistics are? That actually raise money. I mean, of all the companies that are going around with business plans that actually raise money, it's usually less than 1%. I mean, what makes Google so great? They have figured out how to create value for their customers a lot better than their competition. It's very simple. So now if you want a job at Google, what are you going to do that's going to create value for Google that's going to help them increase that percentage of people that they can create value for this so they become more competitive? That's why I say it's not about you. It's really about what can you do for somebody else. And the problem in our society is often the focus is on us and versus saying, what are we doing to help each other? And when, to me, probably the person who ought to get the Entrepreneur Award of the century is Barack Obama. Because when you think about it, his community organizing experience, he learned a lot about how do you create value for other people, which makes him so powerful as a leader. And so it's not about what is he going to get out of the deal. I mean, he's getting a lot out of the deal, obviously, but he's learned a lot about how do you create value. It's the same issue you're talking about. How do you go find a job? Well, find those jobs, look for those opportunities where a company needs to have some value created, where you can create that value for them. And when you think about it that way, there's a lot of opportunities in the world. There's a ton of. They don't show up on the job listings because nobody says, I'm looking for people to create value. They say, I'm looking for a person to do accounting. And so, so I'll stop. I mean, that's my heresy for the moment.
So it looks like Lamar has one more comment, and then we're going to take your very patient question. Thank you.
Just about relative risk of what kind of a path you take. I think, some people say you can, get a skill, take a kind of big company path and go from job to job and sort of climb the ladder. And then there's another path that sort of seems more like gambling to some people. You're kind of going from entrepreneurial thing to entrepreneurial thing, and then maybe it's harder to go from that to the more stable big company versus the other way around. I just think, especially coming out of business school, kind of early in your career, the relative risk is just it's not that much different. I mean, and I've been in enough of these closed door conversations in big companies when they start making decisions on what they're going to do and not do anymore and stuff. And there's a lot of risk in big companies too. You could come out of school and get into a big company and be laid off the next year too. Not for performance reasons or anything. There's a lot of, I'm just thinking, if you want to try something, if you feel like there's something you really, something that can really charge you up and you could do really well at because you're so into it, it's at the core of what you're about, and you can create value doing it. It's important. I think now is a relatively less risky time to try that.
That's great. Thank you so much for being patient. You have the last question.
Sure, thank you.
Make it a good one.
Okay.
No pressure.
I will. I had a question for Stacy, but anybody can answer. When you're in your decision to leave finance for something else, what were some of the criteria that you went over that sort of pushed you over the edge and said, okay, I'm going to take on this risk and go into operations? And also, if you started in operations, would you have done the opposite and go into finance?
I think, I'll do the criteria first, and I'll tell you if I would have done the reverse. I think the decision to move to operations wasn't really part of the criteria. The number one criteria, like I talked about, was I wanted to just do something that was 180 degrees different from, what I was doing now. And so when I looked at the skills that I was using at the time, I was like using very heavily analytical skills. A lot of the work that I was doing was very, very cross-functional. I didn't have people reporting to me, but I still had to influence without authority. I mean, that was a lot of my job. I had a lot of global responsibility in there. I wanted to keep the global responsibility, but I was very much interested in having a larger organization so I could continue to build some leadership skills. And so I wanted to have a role that gave me an opportunity to do that. I also was interested in a lot of what I had done was built relationships in Google cross-functionally, but a lot of those functions were very much on what I call here the business side of the company. So within sales and within people operations and HR and within finance. And I had not reached out and built really effective relationships with people who were in engineering and in product management. And if you see yourself in any long-term career in any big company, you want to make sure you have those relationships across the board. So it was important to me that I got to build some relationships with people who were in parts of the company that I didn't have them. So the role that I was looking for would give me some exposure to working more closely with engineers, working more closely with people in product management. So those were kind of the two things. I wanted kind of some leadership, people management opportunities, and then some opportunities to work with functions that I had not had as much or deep exposure to. And that's how I kind of, sort of decided. What I have done the reverse. I think having worked in, we had John Thompson, who's the CEO of Symantec, come to Google, and I am going to quote him because it was his quote that he helped me actually now realize the value of having moved from what I call a support role to a line function. In his career, he had moved back and forth. Before he became CEO of Symantec, and he said having the other person's perspective, being in a support person versus a line function, and being able to do both and see how the other side thinks makes him much more effective as a CEO because he understands the trade-offs that each side has to make. And I didn't really realize the value of that until I moved out of what's traditionally a support function into a line function. I have a deep appreciation for the value that finance organizations bring, and I have skills and obviously relationships that help me do my job better. And I see that there are managers in my organization that would very much benefit from having that understanding and be much better leaders as a result. So I think taking some time in your career to flip-flop between both, if you can do so in a large company, would be valuable to anybody in the long run.
Thank you. So I thank you all for your questions, your wonderful questions, and I want to give at least 2 or 3 minutes to Art May before we close completely. And Art is the head of the Stanford GSB Black Alumni Network, and I think he wants to talk a little bit about what's coming up.
Yeah, thanks. Let's thank Linda and our panelists and Google for help hosting this. Thank you very much. I just want to take a quick couple minutes in terms of letting you know what's going on with the Alumni Association and what things are coming up. As many of you know, last year we had several different activities across the country in different cities. This year we're doing the same. We've already had the end of last year, so the fiscal 08-09 year. We already had a reception in DC with over 40 to 50 alums participating. We had another mixer and screen showing in LA with about 60 alums, and then this event is our the third one that's going on. Anybody going to the inaugural, the Obama inaugural, that there is a Stanford Alumni Association kind of gala on the 21st. The GSB Black Alumni has also been invited. So if you did not get an invitation for that today, let me know because you're more than welcome to participate in that. And then there are some other things that are coming up, and we'll send in information about it. The students are looking at trying to put together a mixer in San Francisco in February at a place called Mister, which is a barber kind of club, and we had an event last year at this location. So look for that potentially in February. In March, Royal and Jay Ward are trying to put together a a panel on venture capital. This will be held in the East Bay. So, it's another thing that we're trying to put together. We'll have a minute for Natasha to talk about the conference, the BBSA conference. It's coming up in April. But there are several things that are coming up. But one thing that's really important is participation and assistance. So, these are things that are done by people like Royal or Linda that step forward and say, I think we want to do this, and we think it's good for the alums. So we need to hear from the alums what you want and what you like and what doesn't work and what was work and what works well for getting to know other alums. I mean, it's events like this where you can cross-connect and talk to other alums that we think that's important. So that anybody that has any input, I know there's a survey, but please feel free to give Royal, why don't you stand up? So, give Royal or Linda or somebody some information like, yeah, I like this, or can you guys do this, or no, hey, I want to do this, and I'll take this on. I mean, we're looking for help. And in that light, I mean, the Alumni Association is looking at trying to retool itself. So we're looking for volunteers to join a board and help with the students and help with the association. So, again, just please feel free to step forward. With that, I'd like to ask Natasha to come up and talk a little bit about the conference to make sure you all know about the BBSA conference.
Hello, so I'm Natasha Wilson. I'm one of the presidents of the Black Business Student Association, along with Ashley Payton and Julia Collins. And we want to take this opportunity to invite you to a great event. The BBSA Annual Conference is on April 25th, 2009. And I mean, the theme of the conference is Leadership in the New America. What is our role in shaping the Black social, economic, and political agenda? And really focuses on the fact that America is changing. We have our first African-American president coming up. And the role that we play in African-American issues has also changed, moving from traditional civil rights to the new issues that we're facing. And we want to make it more of a working session where we're coming away with actual action items and solutions. And so we're using the daytime to have roundtables, which will be kind of the starting point for a white paper that we're developing on the subject. And then in the evening, we'll hear from Mark Morial, who is the president and CEO of the National Urban League, and about how is he facing the challenge of taking a traditional civil rights organization into the 21st century. So like Art said, it's really about participation. We would love to see all of you there, but also we work in collaboration with the Alumni Association in planning the event. So you can reach out to Art or myself if you would like to help in that. Thank you.
Hey, can I just comment on the importance of supporting these kinds of events? I mean, I hate to see people banging their heads up against the walls trying to find jobs through online listings and things like that. Where I saw some Bureau of the Department of Labor statistics showing like 5% of jobs are found that way through these job listings like that. Something like half the jobs are found through referrals, networking. And supporting these kinds of events is how you network with people. I met everybody here on the panel through just casual networking over time. And the worst time to be trying to network, force it, is when you need a job or something. Now's the time to take advantage of these events. Just mingle with these people, get to know them. And then, who knows, you might be able to help them later. They can help you. A friend of theirs could help you. It's important to really support these kinds of activities.
And then, so I want to bring it back to Google and then turn it over to Sunita. But I also want to say for the Googlers here, let me see who the Googlers are here who are not in the alumni group. As I think networking continues to be huge, and there's never enough time to do that when you work for a company like a Google, which is 24/7 all the time. So I'm glad that you take advantage of hosting and really appreciate the fact that you're having us here, the Black alumni. And I want you to take advantage of us being here too. Okay.
Linda, I also want to make sure we make the connection with the students and the Alumni Association. From our point of we need to support these activities, but the Alumni Association and students, we have not done a good job of connecting. We suck at networking. We get that, and it's something we have to work on, but we have not had that strong connection. And I understand now you actually have an alumni coach or alumni chair in the BBSA. Is that correct?
Is Mike Armstrong still here?
Great,
There you are.
Great.
Okay. Right. These two.
That's a first.
Great.
It's recent, and that's great. So hopefully that connection point we'll start to have more of these activities where we get. But the more important point I'm trying to make is that we want to make sure the Alumni Association is doing for the students what they want. Something you need, something you want, something will help you, and we need that input from you. So you being the liaison for that, that's great, but make sure that you keep that communication going with us forward, because we can make events, and if you guys don't show up, that's not going to help anybody.
Thank you. And actually, the students did a tremendous job last year in reaching out and, to the Black alumni around the 25th anniversary of the conference, the Black Business Students Conference there. So we really appreciate that. So I want to let Sunita wrap it up here and remind you that we have desserts, I guess, and coffee and more wine. So stick around because I think we're here until 9 for those of you who want to continue networking.
Hi, I'm not Sunita. My name is Celeste.
Celeste.
And I work in university programs. I just wanted to see if there are any first-year students here. None? Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, if you know any first-year students who are interested in Google and would like to find out about our internships, if you can come see me, and I'll give you some information to take back to them. Thanks.
Well, golden opportunity. Just one, man. I can't believe it.
So don't worry, I'm not going to take long. First of all, I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists. I think they deserve another round of applause. I personally found it very inspirational, and thank you for your very honest and personal experiences. This was very great to hear, and I'm sure we can learn a lot from your experiences. I'd like also to thank Linda and Art. And there are two people I'd like to thank. They're not here, so hopefully maybe they'll hear that on the YouTube. It's LaFawn Davis, who works on our University Alumni Relations team and who actually put this event together and was in contact with our panelists, and Ed Biley, who was also supposed to be there. They unfortunately had to leave, as some of you noticed, but they've done all this great job. So I think it's thanks to them that we're all here tonight. One last thing. So many of you mentioned the importance of networking, the importance of being involved. As I said in the beginning, we hope that this is just the first of many events that Google and the Stanford Business School Black alumni and student organizations will do together. To do that, we actually also need your help, and we'd like to hear from you. You probably have seen on your chairs there's a short questionnaire, very basic. It takes 1 minute. There's a few questions on the event itself, and there's an open question about your suggestions and your comments. And we'd very much like to hear from you what you'd be interested in, what kind of events you think that your student or alumni organization and Google could do in the future. I'm not promising that we'll do everything, but we'll definitely take this very much into account. It's very, very useful for us. So if you can just take a couple of minutes. We're not done yet. We have some desserts and some coffee and some more food in the back. We hope that you can stick around and continue to chat and network with our wonderful panelists, with each other. And we very strongly believe in the power of networking, and we very strongly support that. And so my maybe last request is continue to come to these events, continue to talk to people and get more people involved, and we'll try to find ways to help you do that. So thank you very much for your attention, and see you soon again.
Thank you.